Could the Rangers trade Artemi Panarin this offseason? And should they?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1308 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Schick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So wanted to spend pretty much the entirety of today's episode talking about the somewhat uncertain future that Artemi Panarin is facing with the New York Rangers. This thing could play out a lot of different ways as we, get into the offseason here, start turning the page toward next season and what the Rangers are going to look like and what they hope to accomplish next season and all that good stuff. But what really got my attention on the Panarin front, we were going to talk about this sooner or later anyway, but there was a video making its rounds on social media from Dave Pagnotta of the NHL Network, and he basically speculated on the future of Artemi Panarin. Now, he was quick to emphasize, as I will be here as well, that he doesn't know this for sure. He's just kind of connecting the dots a little bit, and that's what we're going to do here, and again, discuss the future of Panarin. It's a big question that has to be answered this offseason as Panarin enters the final year of the 7-year contract that he signed with the Rangers so many years ago. And, from Pagnotta, this is what he discussed, in this video that was surfacing, like I said, on social media. Basically, the video was about 8 minutes long, and he quickly discussed, I believe it was 4 different topics from 4 different teams, and one of them just happened to be the Rangers and what the future holds for them, and more specifically, like I said, what the future holds for Artemi Panarin. So here are the big kind of bullet points from this little segment, again, that was on social media and whatnot. First of all, Pagnotta says that the Rangers have less than $10 million in cap space this upcoming season, which is correct. As far as Puckpedia is concerned, I went on the website a little bit earlier today to see what the exact number was. They have the Rangers projected at $8.42 million in cap space for this upcoming offseason. Now, of course, that doesn't account for certain things that might happen, certain players that might get traded away from the New York Rangers. I think Kreider, for sure his name is going to continue to circulate in trade rumors. And obviously, if they were to make a move like that, that opens up a little bit more cap space. But as the way things stand right now, $8.42 million. Pagnotta also went on to talk a little bit about the Rangers needing to re-sign a couple of their own guys, specifically Will Cooley and K'Andre Miller. Both of them are restricted free agents. Miller has arbitration rights. Will Cooley does not. But if you want to keep both of those guys in the fold, obviously they're both looking at some pretty significant raises, and that's going to eat up another chunk of the salary cap that the Rangers have at their disposal. So already the money's getting pretty thin there. And with Miller, it could go either way. He truly could end up as a Ranger next season and beyond, or he could be playing elsewhere as soon as this upcoming season. I would not be surprised either way. It's one of those situations where it really does feel 50-50. I'm leaning a little bit more toward the idea of Miller being traded, given the fact that he is plateaued at best, and I would say even regressed over the last couple of seasons, and given the fact that there's only so much salary cap space to go around, and given the fact that it hasn't happened yet. Drury does give out those in-season contract extensions, and it seems like if there have been talks between the Rangers and Miller and his camp, that they have not been able to get on the same page. They have not been able to get to a number and length of a contract that they feel is reasonable for both sides. So there's a decent chance that Miller gets traded. But again, if even if just Will Cooley is around, that does eat into another chunk of the salary cap. Pagnotta also talked about the possibility of moving Chris Kreider. Again, that's going to continue to surface this offseason. I think there's a pretty good chance that Chris Kreider does get traded. Some people have pointed out that Kreider has a good relationship with Mike Sullivan, and that being the case, maybe that salvages Kreider, and he ends up back with the Rangers next season. It's certainly not impossible, but there was the idea of moving Kreider. There was also the idea of moving Mika Zibanejad. Pagnotta did acknowledge that Mika does indeed have a full no-move clause, so obviously they would have to work their way around that and try to convince Mika to take a deal. But all this is to say that the sort of curveball that Pagnotta threw at us, or the not necessarily a curveball, but The new bit of information that we're not keenly aware of is that it might be at least possible that the Rangers try to trade Artemi Panarin this offseason as well. I'm going to say everything that Pagnotta said in the video. It's not that long. Like I said, it was only a couple of minutes, and I think it's important to have full context. So we'll read this. It'll only take a quick minute here, is what he said. In the last few days, I'm starting to hear some interesting whispers surrounding Artemi Panarin. I don't know if he's fully available, but he's got 1 year left on his contract, and they got to decide whether they're going to continue with the group that they've got, or if they can move Panarin, get a heck of a return, and then utilize cap space, plus some of that capital to rejig this roster. I don't know if that's the path they're going to take, and this may be totally premature for me to even bring up, but we're going to hear some interesting storylines with the New York Rangers in how they retool for next season. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, look, clearly nothing is set in stone yet, and none of us have any idea if Panarin is even open to a trade, if he's willing to move his no-move clause, but it sounds like the Rangers are at least going to do their due diligence and potentially explore possibilities, or, this could also be other teams reaching out to the Rangers, but, Pagnotta is pretty plugged in and pretty reputable, NHL media member. So if he's saying this, I don't think he's just making it up for additional clicks. And something that I've said about Panarin in the past is that he's sort of in no man's land right now. He's obviously still a great player. He had a really good season for the Rangers this past year. Wasn't quite as dominant as the year before, but when you consider how much everything was crumbling on this Ranger team, the fact that he put up another, really good season is impressive. But there's certain Rangers right now that I feel like most of the fans want to see gone. There's other Rangers that it's pretty obvious they're going to be here for the foreseeable future. And Panarin's kind of in between. There's people that want to see him play out this last year of his contract, that believe in the retooling and want the Rangers to contend next season. And there's others that I think they've just seen about enough of this core group of players. When you look at everything that happened this past season and how lethargic the team was and the lack of effort and everything, I think a lot of Ranger fans just want to move on from as many different players as possible this offseason, and that includes Panarin, especially when you consider the potential return package if the Rangers were to trade Artemi Panarin. So there's a lot to discuss here. Obviously, we're just kind of scratching the surface here at this point, but in just a second, we're going to shift our attention to the idea of trading Panarin from Panarin's point of view. Does he want to be traded? Would he at least be open to it? Or is he going to say, no way, no chance, I'm not waiving my no-move clause, and I'm going to stay here for the last year of my deal? We're going to discuss all of that and more in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. All in one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. There's easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is also brought to you by Gametime. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and if you've never been to a live Stanley Cup playoff game, it is unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it is next level. And thanks to Gametime, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Gametime is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer, and with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows the total cost up front, no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you panoramic seat views, so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, a big shout out to the everydayers as always. I believe that our next episode is going to be the long-awaited crossover episode with Locked On Penguins. We decided to push it back to the start of this upcoming week, and we're finally going to be recording that episode and talking to those guys about Mike Sullivan and anything else going on with the Rangers and Penguins. So definitely looking forward to that and looking forward to getting that episode out for all of you guys as well. But for right now, let's go ahead and keep the attention on Artemi Panarin. And, you know, all this talk of Panarin potentially being traded, it immediately begs the question of whether or not he would go along with it. Is he at least open to being traded? Would he actually welcome a trade? Does it depend on, obviously, which team he gets sent to? I have to believe the fact that he has that full no-move clause, there are certain teams that he would look at it and say, no, I'm not going there. But are there certain teams that he would look at and say, yeah, that works for me. I'll go there and I'll waive the no-move clause. I think that's at least possible. And look, no one can answer that question for sure other than Artemi Panarin. The only thing we can really do is hypothesize, connect the dots a little bit, look at what's going on around the Rangers, look at Artemi Panarin and where he is in his career, and look at the situation from the Rangers' point of view and talk about, you know, whether or not it would be more beneficial for the Rangers to keep Panarin or to trade him now and get whatever you can for him, which should obviously be a good amount given that he's obviously an outstanding player. Again, the full no-move clause, that's the first hurdle. And I will always defend a player's right to use it. You can, as a Ranger fan, be upset about the fact that they give these out like Halloween candy. I've made that analogy before. And, you know, that's all well and good. You can be mad at the player for their quality of play or whatever. But if you're going to treat the no-move clause like it doesn't exist, then there's no point of them existing in the first place. Because obviously when contracts are struck and agreements are agreed to, you know, there's concessions on both sides. And if you want that full no-move clause, there's a very good chance that you're giving up something else, likely money, at least some money. Now, Panarin's very well paid and nobody's going to feel bad for him. But, you know, without the full no-move clause, there's a pretty good chance, I think, that he probably could have gotten at least a little bit more from the Rangers. So Panarin has every right to use this clause if that's what he wants to do. But my question is, again, would he be open to waiving it? Maybe even eager to waiving it? You know, Panarin, as I mentioned, still had a very good season this past year. And keep in mind, this is while everything is falling apart around him. And despite everything that happened, 80 games for Panarin, 37 goals, 52 assists, 89 points. He was a -9. That's the first time he was a minus in his career as a Ranger. But again, a very good season. That's a career year for many players in the NHL for sure. And again, that's a down year for Panarin and obviously a down year for the Rangers. But as far as the reasons why I think Panarin might at least be open to waiving the no-move clause is something that I've kind of been alluding to throughout this entire episode, just how god-awful and unbearable to watch the Rangers were this past season. The locker room fell apart, or at least that's certainly what seemed like happened. Anybody that's in that locker room described it as, you know, the vibes being off and it just not being seemingly a very healthy place this past season. And Panarin does not deserve all the blame for that happening, but he deserves some of the blame for that happening. The bottom line, when your team does well and everybody's pulling in the same direction and you're making deep playoff runs, as the Rangers did as recently as last season, then I think for sure some praise is due to the leaders of the team, the captain, the alternate captains. By that same token, when that does not happen and the team does a complete 180 and everybody looks miserable and they look like they don't want to be there and effort is optional and nobody really wants to give it their all on any given night and you're playing like garbage and losing to some of the worst teams in the league over and over and over again. And you have the kind of December that the Rangers had. The list goes on and on and on. But when all those things happen, yeah, that falls on the leadership group as well. And Artemi Panarin wears an A, so it's got to fall on him at least a little bit. So there's all that to consider. But from Panarin's point of view, does he have any doubts about whether this team can pick up the pieces and put everything back together for what will very likely be his final season as a New York Ranger? If he has those doubts, if he doesn't believe that it can happen, then I would think he would be at least somewhat open to going somewhere else. Now, on one hand, I just mentioned he's an alternate captain. He should be one of the guys trying to build everything back together, trying to pull guys in, trying to be one of those glue guys that, you know, gets things pointed in the right direction. And maybe he was one of those guys behind closed doors last season. But again, what we saw on the ice, what we saw off the ice suggests that there wasn't much leadership and guys were kind of just going through the motions. And again, that does fall on Panarin and the other, you know, supposed leaders on this team. As far as other reasons why he might want to leave, you know, we did have that report from The Athletic right at the end of the regular season here. We discussed it when it happened. We're not going to go into all the details right now, but the very summarized version of it is that it did not paint Artemi Panarin in a very good light. So does he want a fresh start after all that? Does he just want to go somewhere else? That's at least possible as well. We'll see if that ends up being the case. Another question that I have, as far as Panarin wanting to leave or wanting to stay or whatever the case might be, has Panarin gotten into the cup chasing portion of his career? Because this is kind of what happens with NHL players. It's one thing early in your career. You're getting started in the NHL and you're just thrilled to be there. Obviously, it's a lifelong dream come true. And if you produce early in your career, you become a UFA, you get a big time contract, you get all the money thrown at you, as Artemi Panarin did. But then you get toward the end of your career when you need at least one more contract, maybe two more contracts at the very end. And you're sort of in a situation where, okay, I've made all the money. I don't have a Stanley Cup. Of course, this only applies for players who have not won a Stanley Cup, and Artemi Panarin is one of those players. So does Panarin, like a lot of NHL players before him, and probably like a lot of NHL players after him, does he now prioritize winning the Stanley Cup above all else? And if he does, again, this goes back to what I said about him potentially having doubts about this Ranger locker room and the ability of these players to put everything back together. If he does feel that way and he really wants a Stanley Cup, does that make him that much more likely to then waive his no move clause and go to a team that, looks like it could be a big time contender? Because given that Panarin only has 1 year left on his contract, and given that the Rangers appear very unlikely to re-sign him beyond next season, that might open the door. I mean, he knows he's going to have to change teams soon anyway. Maybe just do it right now and get it done with and go to a team that he thinks has a better chance of winning a Stanley Cup than the Rangers. Maybe he would like to go to a team that would negotiate a contract extension with him right away, because I don't think the Rangers are going to do that. One way or another, I think this is going to be, at best, the final season for Artemi Panarin as a New York Ranger. They're not going to extend him past that. I just cannot see that happening. So it's possible that he sees the writing on the wall. He knows his time with the Rangers is coming to an end, and he would rather go somewhere else now than wait this one last year and almost be sort of like a lame duck free agent waiting to be, knowing full well that the Rangers aren't going to re-sign him. All that is at least possible, and those are things that I'm sure Artemi Panarin is going to consider if he hasn't already. I think it makes sense for him to weigh all of his options. And as far as like which teams would be a fit for Panarin, I was coming up with a few of them this morning, obviously putting this episode together. We know that he's got some good friends in Detroit, Patrick Kane and Vladimir Tarasenko. Now, Kane is an impending UFA, so that could go either way as far as whether he's back or not. But Tarasenko's there. Even Andrew Kopp, he seemed to hit it off with Kopp when they were playing on the same line when Kopp was a rental for the Rangers. So maybe Detroit's sort of on the rise right now. I mean, they're in a better position than they were certainly in the seasons before that. I thought maybe like Edmonton. And I don't know the exact cap situation of all these teams, but the bottom line is there's usually a way to clear some salary cap space if you absolutely need to. And Edmonton, they're in the playoffs right now. As of this recording, they're up 1-0 on Vegas in the second round. They could win the Stanley Cup this year, but if they don't, like let's say they get to the finals and lose again, or the conference final and they lose, or whatever it might be, is that their all-in move? Do they then send a whole bunch of assets? And it's not going to be Connor McDavid, by the way, but do the Oilers then send a whole bunch of assets to the Rangers in order to get Artemi Panarin, and that's their all-in move? Okay, we just added another superstar to this team. It's full bore. He's only on a 1-year deal, but we're going for it next season. I think Edmonton could make some sense. I thought maybe Vegas, they're always in on everybody, and the salary cap seems to not really apply to them, so they can kind of just do whatever they want. I'm joking, obviously, but they do find some interesting ways to circumnavigate the cap, do they not? I thought maybe like the Blues, they seem like a team on the rise. He's got Pavel Buchnevich there. Maybe that's an appealing spot for Artemi Panarin. The Kings, maybe. I mean, they seem like a team that could use a little bit more scoring punch, and they're probably getting sick of getting knocked out of the playoffs in the first round every single year by the Edmonton Oilers. These are just ideas, like I said, though. We are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but at the same time, welcome to the offseason. This is what we do. We have some fun. We speculate, and it's a very real question and a very real dilemma, both for the Rangers and Artemi Panarin. What is the next move here? What makes the most sense for both parties moving forward? So in just a second, I'm going to weigh in. I'm going to come up with essentially a final verdict here, what I think the Rangers should do with Artemi Panarin moving forward, and I will discuss that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. There's fast and easy hiring. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. It's cost effective as well. Instead of hiring full time, Upwork helps find affordable, top tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now to post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by essentially coming up with a verdict here for Artemi Panarin and, how this whole thing should go and how it will go and what I expect from the Rangers and personally what I would do with Artemi Panarin as the Rangers. The long and short of it, I would not trade Artemi Panarin, at least not yet. Going to elaborate on that in just a second. But there are several reasons. First of all, the Rangers, going by what they've done over the past, calendar year or so, or maybe not quite a calendar year, I think it all really began with the waiving of Barclay Goodrow. The Rangers have gone with, although the Goodrow waiving, we must admit, that was more of a cap saving measure than anything else. But the bottom line, all the moves that followed that, the Rangers have gone with a retooling. It's not a full-fledged tear-down rebuild like it was years ago when the Rangers sent out the letter and, okay, we're going to trade all these players, we're going to rebuild, we're going to turn ourselves back into a contender, which they did for the short term, although now we're not so sure if they still are a contender. This last season would seem to indicate that they're not. But the bottom line, this is what the Rangers are doing. They've clearly dug in with this strategy. They are going with a retooling. And we've debated whether it's the right strategy or not. We've done it in the past. We'll continue to do it throughout the entire offseason here, especially once the Rangers start wheeling and dealing in this offseason. Free agency begins, trades and whatnot, whatever it might be. But when you retool, you're basically going for the quick fix, and that's what the Rangers are doing. Drury made a lot of moves this past season that indicate a retooling over a rebuild. They are aimed at this upcoming season rather than, really far down the road. They're aimed at this upcoming season rather than the season that just finished. The Rangers want to get things right as soon as the start of this upcoming season. You look at some of the moves. They extend Igor Shesterkin. Okay, that's a move looking at the short-term and long-term future. Ditto for the extension for Alexi Lafreniere. You're looking at the short-term and the long-term future of this team. The blockbuster trade for JT Miller. Okay, yeah, that was partially for this past season. I'm sure the Rangers would have still liked to have made the playoffs. They did not. But the bottom line, JT Miller has term, and the Rangers are looking for what he can do for them, going forward, more so than the season that just ended. You also have the trade and subsequent extension for Will Borgen. That's, again, a move that the Rangers made with an eye on the future. They didn't see Kakko as part of their long-term plan, so they trade him. They get Will Borgen, a couple of draft picks too, and, now Will Borgen is signed for the next 4 years. Even something as simple as the trade for Urho Vakanainen and the 2-year extension that he got, I would throw into this mix. He's clearly not a superstar. I think you're looking at him as the number 6 or number 7 defenseman. But again, they wanted to move on from Trouba. And once they did that, they got somebody that they like at least a little bit, and they got him in the fold for the short-term future. So the Rangers are going with a retooling. This is not a full-fledged tear-down rebuild where you're trading everything that isn't nailed down and stockpiling all these draft picks and all these prospects and all this stuff. That's not what the Rangers are doing at this point in time. So with all that said, why would you do all these things to theoretically make your team better for this upcoming season, but then turn around and trade away your best player, your most talented player, your best 5-on-5 player? That just really wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. And on top of everything I just said, Panarin is also a player for which the Rangers would not be able to get equal value. If you trade Artemi Panarin right now this offseason, I don't see how that makes you a better team for next year. And there might be some people saying, you got to rebuild. Don't worry about next year. It should be a long-term rebuild. I get it. You can certainly make that case. But again, that is not what the Rangers are doing. The Rangers are going for the retooling. They're trying to fix this thing on the fly and do essentially a short-term rebuild just from one season to the next. A retooling is what we've been calling it. And so, you trade Panarin. What are you going to get that's going to make this team better or at least as good for next season? I don't think that deal really exists. And no, the Senators are not going to trade Brady Tkachuk to the Rangers in exchange for Artemi Panarin. 1 year of Artemi Panarin. That is simply not going to happen. So we can forget about that, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I just don't see the point of doing all this retooling, all these moves that are made with an eye on next season and then giving away your best player. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I know a concern that a lot of Ranger fans are going to have is, well, you can't let Artemi Panarin play out this contract and then walk next offseason and get nothing for him. And I get it. But I do think, once again, given the retooling approach that is already clearly underway here, the Rangers are better off for right now keeping Panarin rather than trading him. So my idea for next season, you keep him through the offseason. You go into next season with Artemi Panarin still on this roster in the final year of his deal, and you see how everything goes. If the Rangers can actually pull this off, if they can retool on the fly here and make themselves into a contending team, if they start winning again next season under their new head coach, Mike Sullivan, maybe he reinvigorates the team a little bit. Maybe he gets the most out of these guys. If that happens, if the Rangers are playing a brand of hockey where you actually believe that, okay, this team can contend this season, if we get toward the trade deadline next year and, the Rangers are in a spot where they're clearly going to be buyers, then at that point, we don't trade Artemi Panarin. We actually do make a run at this thing. Now, if that does not happen, if the Rangers are at the trade deadline next season and it's on the outside and they're on the outside of a playoff picture looking in, then at that point, all bets are off. You do what you can. You create as much of a bidding war as possible for Artemi Panarin, and you sell him to the highest bidder, and you move on with your life. And that all obviously is dependent on Artemi Panarin being willing to move his to waive his no move clause, which I think he will at that point. I don't know that for sure. But if the Rangers are in the toilet next season and they're nowhere near the playoffs, I mean, does Artemi Panarin really want to play out the last couple of months with the Rangers? Probably not. I get the feeling at that point he'd probably be willing to waive it and the Rangers would make that move. So that's kind of where I'm at. There's no real reason to rush this. You see how things play out next season. If the Rangers do a great job next year and everything turns around and, oh my God, we're contenders again, then you keep Panarin through the deadline. If the opposite happens, you trade Panarin through the deadline. It's pretty much as simple as that. One other thing that I should mention, though, because I know some people are going to be in favor of, well, trade Artemi Panarin now and you'll have more cap space for this upcoming, free agent class. And that is true. That is one reason that you could consider doing it now. But you talk about cap space for this upcoming free agent class. There's not really a ton of elite free agents. When you look at this class, it feels a little bit thinner than some other classes that we've seen in recent history. Mitch Marner is obviously right at the top. I don't see the Rangers going after Mitch Marner. That doesn't really feel like a Chris Drury kind of a move. Marner is a little bit too similar to Panarin. He's not the biggest guy, and he's all skill and not necessarily a bunch of grit. I don't know how Marner grades out defensively. I would have to look that up. He doesn't seem like a Chris Drury kind of player to me. There's all this talk and all this emphasis on making this Ranger team bigger, tougher, more physical, and all that stuff. And I just don't think that they're going to trade Artemi Panarin to then bring in Mitch Marner, who's somewhat similar to Panarin. Now, obviously, Marner's younger, and if you were to sign Marner, then obviously he would be here for more than just this upcoming season because very clearly he's going to get a multi-year deal. But I just don't think that's the move. I don't see the Rangers doing that. And I think Marner's going to get just an enormous contract, and the Rangers have enough salary cap issues as it is. So there's that to consider. As far as other UFAs, I mean, who are you going after here that's going to make this team better than it would be with Artemi Panarin? Brock Besser, Nikolai Ehlers. A couple people mentioned some defensemen, Provorov, Gavrikov. I mean, okay, yeah, they would make the Rangers better. Would you be better off with those guys than Artemi Panarin, though? With one of those guys than Artemi Panarin? No. So as far as needing cap space, I mean, it would be nice to have more, and obviously that would mean the Rangers could be a little bit more active in free agency this upcoming season. But there's no free agent superstar that's available this offseason that to me looks realistic to the Rangers, even if they do move on from Artemi Panarin and open up more cap space. So there's that to consider as well. Some people have already begun to, Ranger fans, have already begun to throw out the idea of making a run at Connor McDavid. And for anybody that needs a refresher, McDavid will be a free agent, at least as of now, after next season. Now, of course, McDavid and the Oilers can always, come to an agreement on a contract extension between now and then. That's entirely possible. But you don't need to move on from Panarin now to make room for McDavid then, because Panarin's only got 1 year left on his deal. So he'll be off the books for next season anyway, next offseason. And if you really want to take a stab at that thing and make a run at McDavid, the Panarin money will be off the books and you can proceed accordingly. So we'll see. That sounds like a full-on deep into the offseason episode, doesn't it? Can the Rangers acquire Connor McDavid? There's a lot to get through and a lot of hurdles, but I think we could have some fun with that at some point during what's going to be a pretty long offseason. We're used to deep playoff runs at this time of the year, and instead the offseason started early, so we got a lot of different things we can talk about, and we can think outside the box and even do an episode on the Rangers potentially signing Connor McDavid, after next season. Nothing's impossible. We'll kind of just leave it there for today. But another reason to keep Panarin, while I like the idea of keeping him in the fold, at least at the start of the season, and again, we'll reassess the trade deadline, but I like the idea of him playing with some of these important young Ranger forwards. We've called it the Panarin bump, right? Nearly everybody that has played on the same line with Artemi Panarin since he's gotten here to the New York Rangers has seen a significant uptick in their offensive production. It's been going on ever since the moment that he's put pen to paper with the New York Rangers, and it's continued really. Maybe the 1 year, the one season you could say that it didn't really happen that much was this past season because Trocheck and Lafreniere both took a step back. But for the most part, everybody that plays with Artemi Panarin, they are going to be a far more productive player playing with him than not playing with him. And the Rangers have these young, important players coming up through the system. All of them have now made their NHL debut. We're talking about the big three, of course, of Gabe Perreault, Brandon Hoffman, Brett Berard. I like the idea of at least one of those guys getting a chance to play with Artemi Panarin, maybe even at the start of this upcoming season. We'll see how the Rangers look to play it. Maybe Perreault. That might be the one that actually makes the most sense. And of course, Perreault would have to make the Rangers out of training camp, and that could go either way. But if he does, then you could have a line where Panarin's on the left wing and Perreault is on the right wing, which is the natural position for each of them. As far as Panarin playing with Hoffman or Berard, you could do that, but all three of them are natural left wingers. And we saw Hoffman play some right wing for the Rangers. So anything's possible. Honestly, the more I think about it, maybe Hoffman, because he can do some of the grunt work, the dirty work, playing with Panarin and maybe Trocheck as well. They got some options, but the bottom line, I do like the idea of Panarin, playing with some of these young kids next year and helping them build confidence and get their NHL careers, off on the right foot. They've already debuted all of them, obviously, but next year is when I think you're looking for big contributions from those young players. So again, I can't really make a whole lot of sense of trading Artemi Panarin right now. I think, again, what you do, you keep him for now. You hope to get the most out of him next season. You hope that the Rangers turn things around. If they don't, you move him to the trade deadline. Simple as that. But we'll call it there for today. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that's @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.